There are only a few days left to join the Business Edit Group coaching program before prices increase on January 1st. If you're a service provider who's feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and underpaid, don't let another year go by staying stuck. If you want this to be the year that you finally build the business of your dreams, one that lights you up, doubles your revenue, and allows you to work part-time hours, now is the time to join. In this program, you'll follow my signature 5-step method for building a productive and profitable business. You'll get business minimalist strategy, marketing systems, and productivity roadmaps that are simple to understand and easy to implement, plus 12 months of weekly coaching to help you overcome any road bump that comes up along the way. Let this be the year that you finally hit your revenue goals and create a life first business. Join me inside the Business Edit at www.jadeboyd.co/coaching and get my step-by-step blueprint with everything you need to build your dream business in 2024. Again, the early sign-up pricing ends on December 31st, and the program will officially kick off on January 2nd. So don't wait. If this sounds appealing to you, but you're not sure if it's the right fit, feel free to DM me on Instagram and we can chat. My only goal here is to help you make the right decision for you and your business. And you can find me on Instagram at jadeboyd.co. Now back to the show. Welcome to the Business Minimalist Podcast, a podcast about redefining productivity for the modern woman in business and finding ways to work smarter, not harder, in business and life. I'm your host, Jade Boyd. I'm an MBA, business strategist, and mentor who helps overwhelmed business owners simplify and scale their service-based businesses with strategy and systems. On this podcast, we'll explore simple ways to earn more while working less. If you're ready to scale your business, bring order to chaos, ditch the busy work, and make space for what really matters, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Business Minimalist Podcast. Welcome to the first episode of 2023. I'm super excited to be back and joining you for another episode today. This year, I'm actually moving to weekly episodes. I'm going to try it out for quarter 1 and see how it works. So if you're not yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button because you won't want to miss the awesome episodes that we have coming out this quarter. And I really wanted to kick off this first episode of 2023 by sharing a few of my favorite books about productivity. Obviously, a lot of you are thinking about your goals for the year and you have that fresh start feeling right now. And I know that a lot of you are probably looking to increase your productivity or prioritize things that are important to you or to stop the busyness in your life, to get organized and feel resolved to make 2023 a year in which you live your life differently and make space for those things that you really want to work on, whether in your business or in your personal life. And these books that I'm going to talk about today really are my favorite productivity books of all time. And if you're interested in buying any of these books, you can head to the show notes and I have them all directly linked, along with a few of my other favorite productivity books. But these 4 that I'm going to talk about today are books. I've read all of them more than once. And honestly, I could probably read all 4 of these every single year and get that reminder that I need because there's so many fundamental and essential principles for productivity in these 4 books. And I think it's good to remind yourself of those regularly, but they're so packed with good information, great writing, great principles, helpful graphics, like all of them are just so good. So today I'm going to go through all 4 of my favorite productivity books of all time and break down the lessons that I learned from each of them, how I've applied it to my life and my business. And I hope that you'll pick at least one of these to read this year because honestly, all 4 of these books have changed the way that I live my life and deeply impacted the way that I run my business as well. And also the way that I talk about productivity and teach about productivity on the podcast and with my clients and other places. So I'm really excited to dive deeper into these with you today. Okay, book number 1 is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. The subtitle is The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And this is probably one of the first books about productivity I read that flipped the script on the notion that productivity is about getting as many things done as possible, as quickly as possible. It's the first book that I read that kind of discredited that and said, no, wait. Productivity isn't about how fast or how much you get done. It's about making room to get the right things done. And since I read this book, I've seen that principle in a lot of other speakers and books and podcasts about productivity as well. But this is really the first book that I read that introduced that concept to me and completely changed the way that I think about getting things done and the way that I think about productivity. So in the book, he walks you through how to figure out what actually is essential to your life and how to eliminate everything else. A phrase that he says over and over again is how to separate the vital few from the trivial many. And he points out in so many different aspects of life how there's so many things that are on our to-do list, but really there's only a handful that are vital and there's a lot that are trivial. And that's going back to like the 80-20 principle, Pareto's principle. 20% of your effort or your inputs create 80% of your results. And this is just kind of a new way to look at that principle. But his writing, honestly, if you listen to his podcast or read his other books, one of his other really popular ones is Effortless, which I would also probably reread every single year. It was really good. I've only read that one once, though. His writing is just so thought provoking and so perfectly worded. He's just one of those authors that reads kind of like a philosopher mixed with like your best friend. It's just really easy to listen to. I read the audiobook, so I didn't technically read the paperback. I listened to it on Audible, but I've probably listened to it 2 to 3 times by now, probably 3 times. It's just really good, and I could listen to it all day, every day. And he has a wonderful voice for reading as well. But really, how this has impacted my view of productivity, after reading this book, have changed the way that I think about getting things done and have really switched to try to focus on the things that are important to me and make more space for things like relationships and my personal health, the things that truly are essential and rewarding in the long term, but hard to prioritize in the short term when there's so many things that come up that feel more urgent or heavy in the moment, but really are not that important. So overall, I feel like it's just given me permission to give myself grace in the small things that I am letting slide, and even giving myself permission to say, I'm not just going to let it slide. I'm just going to say no and not do that in the first place. It has helped me set healthier boundaries with the perspective of, by saying no to these things that I kind of want to say yes to, like they're good things or good opportunities, but I can say no. And in saying no, I make space for the things that I actually care about that are more important. So again, the title, if you want to go look for it, is Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown. And you can also check out his podcast, the Greg McKeown Podcast. But I'll link the book link in the show notes. So if you scroll up on whatever app you're at, you should have a link that either says episode website on iTunes, for example. You can click on that, or I'll have a special show notes link and you can go to the blog post that has all of these things linked up. Okay, moving on to book number 2. This book is called The One Thing, The Surprisingly Simple Truth About Extraordinary Results by Gary Keller. And he also has a podcast that's hosted by other people, not by Gary himself, but it's the One Thing podcast, which has some great episodes if you want to go and check that out as well. But basically, this book, like the title says, focuses on identifying the one thing. So similar to Essentialism, that talks about weeding out the trivial many in order to focus on the vital few. This book takes that kind of a step further and argues that there's only one thing that you should be focused on at a time. It talks a lot about setting priorities and what that looks like to choose that top priority and how to actually prioritize your top priority when it comes to your calendar and time blocking your one thing. In the later chapters, they talk about time blocking, and those chapters, obviously, I'm a huge fan of time blocking. But if you want a very simple step into the world of time blocking, simply time blocking the one thing is a very simple, easy step to move towards blocking out time for the things that matter to you. And of course, after you are successful at time blocking your one thing, you can move on to time blocking your task batches or your marketing tasks or whatever that thing might be to make sure that you have time for those things that are really important to you, the vital few. But if you have never done time blocking before and are curious and want to like test the waters and see if it works for you, I would highly suggest picking up this book and learning their very simple process for time blocking your one thing. And as the subtitle mentions, it does seem surprisingly simple, But in the whole book, he shares stories and research about how narrowing it down to one thing and focusing on one thing at a time actually increases your results. It actually helps you become more productive because you're able to give your full effort to the thing that you're focused on. And scattered efforts lead to scattered results, right? So this book is the opposite of that. How to focus your efforts on one thing in order to get extraordinary results. And a question that he asks over and over again in this book that he repeats is, and it sticks in my mind, and I hear myself asking myself this question over and over again. So again, reading this book has deeply impacted the way that I run my life and my business. But the question is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? And this works on a large scale and a small scale. So overall, for example, it's the first episode of the year. So I know you're all thinking about your goals for 2023. So looking at 2023, asking yourself, what is the one thing I can do this year such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? So instead of having that laundry list of goals, narrowing it down to the one thing, choosing your priority, that one thing that if you got it done, everything else would become easier or unnecessary. And you can also do that on a smaller horizon. So you could do that on a quarterly basis, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm going to do an episode later this year on quarterly planning and how to choose your one thing for the quarter. But you can do it on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, and of course on a daily basis, choosing each day to say, what one thing do I actually need to get done today? So that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary. And that helps you narrow down to what is actually more important and what's going to move the needle in your business and in your life. Again, separating the vital few from the trivial many. So it's one of my main takeaways from the book, asking myself that question over and over again when I'm planning out my day or my year. He also talks a bit about purpose in this book. And this is something that, especially over the past year, I've been exploring really deeply myself. It's a question that I've always been curious about and read about and asked myself. But I feel like last year I made such leaps and bounds in terms of discovering my purpose and having clarity on what's important to me and the work that I really want to do in the way that I want to live my life, mostly because my business took such a huge pivot last year out of photography and into the business and marketing and productivity side as a business and productivity coach now. And that pivot it required me to do a lot of reflection. It required me to try a lot of different things, doing a lot of different client projects. And I've talked about this before in the podcast, so sorry if I sound like a broken record. But 2022 was definitely the year that I gained clarity on my purpose. And I can't tell you how powerful that clarity has been in terms of making progress in my business and seeing better results, but also just enjoying my life and being more fulfilled by the work that I'm doing and my work being easier. Like, I don't have to force myself to get things done because my work is aligned to my purpose and it's stuff that I'm good at, stuff that excites me, stuff that lights me up. And I can't imagine not doing what I'm doing, right? It's the thing that I was doing in my free time as a distraction instead of doing the real work before. But now it is my real work, which makes success so much easier. So, anyway, his book has a chapter about purpose and the power of purpose in finding your priority and your one thing. And so if you are overwhelmed by your to-do list or your goal list for this year and want an easier way to generate results in your business or in your life, honestly, he's a business owner. So I think that this book especially is really applicable to business owners. Essentialism is more general or life focused, or if you have a full-time job, it speaks a lot about prioritizing your essentials and saying no to like coworkers and your boss and how to do things like that. So I mean, it's relevant to business owners too, but the one thing I would say is directly relevant to business owners because a lot of the principles are directly related to entrepreneurs and like the stories he uses, some of them are entrepreneurs and small businesses. He does coaching for small businesses. So, highly recommend if you're a business owner reading The One Thing, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed by many things that you have going on this year. Okay, book number 3 really doesn't need any introduction. I actually just read an email from the author this week saying that he has just sold over 10 million copies of this book. You've definitely heard of it. I'm sure that you know somebody who's read it and talked about it before because it's an amazing, essential book when it comes to learning about productivity. And that book is Atomic Habits. I'm sure that you guessed that. The subtitle is An Easy and Proven Way to Build Good Habits and Break Bad Ones by James Clear. And if this is not a season for you to sit down and read an entire book, the Audible book for this one is also great. I've, again, listened to it at least 3 times by this point. It's one of those books that you can read over and over again because forming good habits and breaking bad habits is such an essential part of living a productive life. And I think this book really changed the way that I think about productivity because of the atomic part. He really focuses on how small habits and small shifts compound over time. A quote from the book is changes that seem small and unimportant at first will compound into remarkable results if you're willing to stick with them for years. And I love goal setting, obviously. I'm passionate about the power and the process of setting goals and what that means for your productivity. But I think if you want to see real results in your business or in your life, how you spend every day and every week matters so much more than those achievements at the end of the year, those one-time things that you can hang up on your wall or check off of your list. The way that you spend every day matters, and the habits that you have, good or bad, really do affect the quality of your life and of your business results. Honestly, I think a lot of business owners have large goals and struggle to make real progress on them week by week or month to month because they don't have bite-sized things that they can do, or they don't know what those little atomic habits are that they need to do in order to drive results. So there's definitely a period of testing when it comes to the business side and creating habits and routines in your business. There's a time for testing out what habits are actually generating results in your business. And then there's a time to double down on the ones that you see working, right? But I think that he changed my mindset in terms of instead of focusing on the lag, like the result that you're going to get at the end of the year or the end of the quarter, focusing on the lead, those things that you can control, the things that you show up and do every day, you can decide to do or not to do, completely changed the way that I pursue goals and the way that I think about my business. This year, I have very few goals. I actually think I only have one goal for my business, which is a financial goal. But at the end of the day, that breaks down into my quarterly priority and then the habits that I have every quarter, month, week, and day. So this year is definitely a year that I'm focusing almost all of my effort when it comes to business on my routines and on my habits because I've seen from experience and from working with clients that the way that you spend each week and each day matter a lot when it comes to what you're going to generate and the success you're going to see in your business month after month, year after year. Okay, and on to book number 4. I feel like I'm already losing my voice. This is my first day back from my Christmas vacation, and I'm an introvert. So I did not spend a lot of time talking to people while I was on vacation, and talking for even 20 minutes at this point seems to have worn out my voice. So I'm sorry if I sound a little bit crackly. Okay, moving on to book number 4 is When: The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing by Dan Pink. And I have absolutely mentioned this book multiple times on the podcast before. I have the Audible version of this one as well, and I have listened to it twice. And this book has absolutely changed the way that I think about my to-do list in terms of time blocking. This is something I do for myself, but also for my clients when we're talking about increasing productivity or when I do ideal week sessions to help business owners set up their ideal week so that they can actually create a schedule or a template for a schedule that allows them to get the things that they need to get done and also incorporate, rest and personal health activities and relationships into their schedule as well. I always ask questions that I learned to ask based on reading this book because not all time is created equal. You have definitely felt this throughout the day. Everybody has times of the day where they are more productive, more alert, more energetic, and certain times of the day, for most of us, after lunch, the little afternoon slump, where we feel very tired, very unmotivated, and unable to focus as much as we do in other parts of the day. And this varies for people based on what your rhythm is, but generally it follows the pattern of having a morning peak, either right after you wake up or 1 to 2 hours later, where you feel a little bit better, more energetic, more alert. And then there's the afternoon trough, is what the author calls it, where you know it's tough to stay awake, it's tough to focus, it's hard to get things done. And then there's some sort of evening rebound, and the time again varies, but there's that time in the day where you get that second burst of energy and are able to get more things done again. For me, that happens around like 3 p.m. each day, which is when I'm recording this podcast right now. It's 3:30 as I'm recording this, but I have that afternoon trough where I got a lot of admin and like email stuff done. And now I'm moving on to the creative stuff, which is recording a podcast. And so I've definitely oriented the way that I work around those times a day where I have different levels of energy. And if you're a woman, obviously that cycle fluctuates throughout the month too. So not every day is equal. I think he writes this from a man's perspective where there is more consistency throughout the different weeks and months on how much energy you have at different parts of the day. So I'm not saying this applies to every single day, but generally it helps me align my energy and my time to the tasks that matter most and the tasks that I need the most focus and energy in order to complete to the highest level of my ability. And this came up on the last podcast episode with Jess Massey from Hustle Sanely. She has read At Your Best by Carrie Newhoff, I think is how it's pronounced. And I've heard that these two books are very similar. I haven't read At Your Best, but it's on my list. But that might be another book to read if you're interested in this concept of knowing when you have your best energy and how you can align your work to your energy levels throughout the day. So one last quick summary if you want to jot down what these 4 books are. They are Essentialism by Greg McKeown, The One Thing by Gary Keller, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and When by Dan Pink. And again, go over to the show notes or the episode website and click through and you can see all of these books listed, as well as many other of my favorite productivity books of all time. I have several recommendations on that list, but I wanted to focus this episode on the top 4 ones that are so good and so deep. And again, I could reread them every year and get something new out of them. So if you've read one of these, let me know what your favorite is, or if you have other recommendations for me. I have a goal this year, a personal goal to read 100 books. So if you follow along on Goodreads, you can see some of what I'm reading in terms of like fiction, productivity, business, sprinkled in a little bit of romance in there. So let me know if you have any recommendations when it comes to business and productivity. I would love to know, and I hope you're able to pick up one of these books this year. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Minimalist Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate it on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening today. Your rating and review will help more small business owners discover helpful episodes each week. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the tools and resources mentioned in today's episode, because good ideas don't grow businesses, action does. And if you want more business minimalist tips and resources, head on over to Instagram and follow me at jadeboyd.co. I'd love to hear what you took away from today's episode. I'll see you next time on the Business Minimalist Podcast.